Welcome back to the Firearms Nation podcast. First of all, I want to wish you all a very happy new year. I hope you are looking forward to 2023 as much as I am. Lots of great things to come. And like I mentioned in previous episodes, you can not only listen to the Firearms Nation podcast, but now you can watch the podcast on YouTube at Firearms Nation. Be sure to subscribe to that channel and as well subscribe to the podcast so you won't miss out on any content. Today, I'm reaching into a previous interview I did with competitive shooter Yong Lee. Yong is a former SWAT officer which he recently retired, and he's a 4-division Grandmaster shooter. This means he put in the work in 4 divisions to get that GM card. I've known Yong for many years, and I've taken a class with him. And not only is he a great guy, but he's very knowledgeable and loves to share how he trained to get to Grandmaster. So whether you're a competitive shooter or just interested in becoming just better at shooting, I hope you enjoy this show. And so let's just get right into it. Tell us about, how you got into shooting. You're in law enforcement, correct? Was the primary avenue for you to get into shooting?
Yeah, almost 31 years now in law enforcement, but I've always had interest. But I think I said a couple of years ago in the summit that I wasn't one of those kids that had the privilege of learning how to shoot from parents or relatives or even friends. So I didn't really touch a gun until I was, I think, 20 years old, around there, a sophomore in college. When I was at Texas A&M University, my roommate introduced me to it. And so basically I learned how to plink revolvers. My first gun, besides a .22 rifle, was Model 66 357 Magnum Smith & Wesson. So that was my experience with firearm. And it didn't really bother me. I was a pretty strong kid. I didn't really understand anything about shooting. I knew that you line up the sight somehow and you just squeeze the trigger at some point, and nobody really taught me. So I was kind of self-taught, and that turned out to be really something that hampered me for years before I figured out what was happening. So when I got into law enforcement back in '88 after college, I had strong interest in firearms. It's just that, and I think you can relate, the firearms instructors basically told me to front sight focus and pin the trigger and release. That was it. He really didn't cover much about grip stance, how to see the sight, how to see the target, none of that. So from '88 until around 2006, I really didn't know what I was doing. It was just kind of trying to shoot with athleticism, just trying to pay attention. And it was just mixed results. I mean, sometimes I would shoot great. Sometimes I would be terrible. And thankfully, I became one of the assistant instructors right away when I came to Bellevue, Washington here for the police department. And they just needed assistant range masters, and they just appointed me. So I was lucky to be getting into it back in '91 right away. But I really didn't know until I met some key people that really helped me along the way. And, I didn't really learn trigger management until '96, Think about that, like 8 years into law enforcement. And then I finally learned trigger management. It was amazing. It was a 75-year-old man, as I remember his name, Roy Leopard, and former military guy. And he taught law enforcement and military, and he basically showed me how to trigger with the pellet gun in the firearms instructor class. And that just kind of changed everything for me. So I learned how to trigger, and, I can shoot a 50-yard target in 10 ring, 9 times out of 10 with the decent semi-auto or revolver. And once I could do that, I started really accelerating, and unfortunately, I think you can also relate to this, that I didn't get into USPSA or action shooting competition until late 1999. So years after I became a police officer, because so many people have told me, don't ever go to USPSA or IPSC matches because you become a trigger slapping, sloppy shooter. So terrible for, tactics, to get you killed on the street. So you heard that over and over. And that was before the internet. So you really didn't know how to really see for yourself unless you're there. So in 99, I actually went to one. I realized I've been had for years. And so I started getting into unofficial USPSA matches end of 99. And then I shot, end of 98. And then in 1999, I think around fall, somewhere around August, September, I shot my first match, USPSA match in Marysville, Washington. And I was hooked. And my goal after that was to try to do what these guys like Travis Tomasi, Grandmasters, what they could do with the pistol was amazing to me. And I wanted to learn how to do that and supplement that knowledge to and apply it to law enforcement and bring that knowledge back to my guys at the police department. And so I've been doing that ever since.
That's something that you bring up that I think gets away from a lot of people is when you're shooting, when you get to that upperclassman, A-class, master, GM in USPSA, and you're able to do things with that pistol, most people don't realize how impressive that is. We're so into it that it's nothing to us, but the average shooter, to the average law enforcement officer, they look at that and they're just astounded by that. That is completely out of their realm.
Oh yeah, I agree. Sometimes they don't understand it and they fear it. And what I saw during that time is, my friends, my peers would go to shoot those matches with me and they would literally get destroyed. And you know what I mean? I mean, they're shooting 25 to 35% of the top guys. And it's difficult for law enforcement because police officers, that is, because you want to have that feeling of invincibility, especially in my generation of officers. They made you have that confidence in yourself that you're going to go out and prevail. So, and they go shoot against civilians, sometimes junior, sometimes elderly women, and they're getting beat by them. And they don't know how to deal with it. So they come back and I hear things like, oh, you never want to go there. It's terrible training for law enforcement. It'll teach you bad habits and you're going to get killed on the street. And this is how so many of my peers never went to the USPSA or IPSC matches.
When you started shooting competition, you did your first classifier. Where did you come in as?
Oh, yeah, definitely unclassified. I didn't even know what it was. All I knew is I saw these guys shooting, like I see Travis shooting 10, 11, 12 splits, up to the targets that are 7 yards or sometimes more. And they're hitting more accurately than most people are shooting, bullseye, slow fire. And I'm watching this and I go, well, I wonder if I could do that. Of course, when I did that is Charlie Delta, CD or, you barely hitting the edges or something like that. And so I start experimenting, talking to a lot of them, trying to learn about how they're doing it. Really fascinated by the process of how fast they were seeing the sights. We're traditionally taught to mount the gun on one target, focus on the front sight, and keep squeezing the trigger until you get the good 10-ring hits. But usually, you're shooting like 1 round per second, maybe 1 round every 2-3 seconds. I mean, USPSA shooters are shooting 3, 4, 5, 6 rounds a second and hitting everything. So that really intrigued me, really got me hooked. And I want to know how they're doing it. So, and at the time, not everybody really shared, unfortunately. I think now shooters share more information than the 90s, my personal experience, that is. they didn't really talk to the newcomers that much. And so I pretty much had to try to figure out myself. I took a lot of notes and I did a lot of watching. I watched shooters, went to the nationals, watched the top shooters like Robbie Latham, Jerry Barnhart, Todd Jarrett, Super Squad. I followed them around and took notes and see what they were doing, how are they doing. And those were more educational than anything out of all the instructions I ever got. And then I kind of broke it down to what they were doing, and I figured it out, if you will. I figured out how they're shooting so fast and getting the hits.
Okay, and let's go right to that. What were they doing?
Well, the fundamental difference between what they do, I think what we do, and your average bullseye type of shooters, law enforcement type of shooters, is that they don't look at the sight the same way. You only use enough of the sights to get the job done. You only focus on the front sight if you absolutely need to at distance, or the shot is so tight that you must line those up to be able to get that small target hit or distance. Otherwise, you're primarily somewhere between target focusing and sight referencing to more referencing the sight, seeing enough of the sight to get the hit with the gun. Also, another difference is they work to make sure wherever they look, the gun follows their eyes. So they're able to, with body index, line up the gun to their eyes and move the rest of the body and not the gun or the upper body holding the gun, so that wherever you look, you're hitting. So, and that happens subtly for some people. Some people, when they're learning, have to do it really in an exaggerated manner to learn how to do that. So when I started doing that, I actually exaggerated these movements. And on the video that I think you're going to bring up, I exaggerated those movements so people can see what I'm doing there.
So when you, again, got into it, what was your first classification score?
It was up and down. I didn't know what was good. I just shot as fast as I could. I didn't understand the scoring system that well. After I shot, the initial 6 classifiers, I got classified as C. And that really crushed me because I'm pretty greedy. And I was like, shoot, I should at least be A. And that's, I was typical, I had that confidence of being a cop, and I was like, hey, I'm better than this. But of course, I was quickly humbled when other C-class shooters were just as good or better than me. I mean, they were doing, back then, it was, at least in my section, it was all about the trigger speed race. And people were doing 12 splits sometimes as C-class. They just weren't hitting. They're outside of the center, Charlie Deltas, stuff like that. But they can do the speed. So I realized, I'm going to have to do that. And so I learned how to trigger fast. That's something that I've never done in law enforcement. Didn't know it was possible. And then with a lot of experimentation and watching others, I learned what it took to get the trigger going real fast and how to set up the guns to do that. So obviously you need accuracy and speed. For me, I always had accuracy. I didn't really have much speed. So I really dove into trigger speed. And I just, I was kind of known for doing 11 splits on all these targets. Not great hits. But then I would win stages sometimes with Charlie Deltas in a limited division, So, but of course, as you progress, you're going against people who can do the same speed and get alphas. So I had to really change the way I do business there. But initially, it was all about the speed, watching others do the same and competing against open shooters as well. So, I wanted to shoot at that speed.
What division were you in?
Limited. I started limited with HK USP 40, and then change over to a Glock 35, 40 caliber, just stock. And I did do my own trigger job to smooth it out a little bit. And then back then I was just shooting 185 power factor Winchester white box. So it was brutal to my hands. Back when the power factor was, what was it, 175. So we were all shooting 185 power factor. So it's brutal. So I'd start reloading, try to tame that down a little bit, make the gun cycle a little faster. And then, of course, I saw people with SVIs, STIs. So back when I could get law enforcement discount on those guns through like Speed Shooter, those companies, I actually got one. I got a SVI, long dust cover, bull barrel with 6 magazines for $1,600. I don't think you can do that now. But anyway, that's the gun that I actually made GM with.
Okay.
First one.
But before we get to that, I want to say you were shooting 11 splits with a Glock 35?
Oh, yeah, I can shoot the Glock 35 faster than SVI. I just can't control it as well. I tend to overshoot the transition with the lighter Glock 35. The heavier gun was more stable for me. You know, difference between like 28, 29 ounces to about 40 to 45 ounces when I was shooting with the SVI. So it did make a difference. And it just wasn't as brutal in the hand at power factor that was 185 back then.
How long was it between, you were C class to making GM? What are we talking about in terms of time?
I made B class. So I made C class in beginning of, I got my classifications in. It was winter, so I didn't shoot a lot. So beginning in the spring of 2000, I made C class. And then I think in June, I shot my first area match as a B class. In June of 2000, I shot 90% as a B class in the Area 1 in Montana, Missoula. I made top 8, I think, in B class. And people were like, wow, you're a B class. You shot 90% at an area match. And I was like, man, that's not good enough. I need to shoot like 100%, you know?
Right.
So then I went to my first nationals in 2000 in the fall. And I went in as a B class, and I shot A class at at the nationals, which was really educational for me, watching all the top shooters. I've never seen them live, shooting, except for like ESPN or something like that. And I made A class by the virtue of the fact that I shot A class at the nationals. So in the fall, I was A class. In December, I think, of 2000, I was master. And then in Area 1 in Marysville, Washington, April of 2001, I was registering, and I saw GM on my card, on my registration. I laughed, and I said, no, I'm not GM, I'm master. They said, no, we did the calculation this morning, you're GM. So I didn't know. I showed up at the Area 1 match in April, I think it was, and I shot GM, and I shot terrible. All of the expectations, living up to the GM just really freaked me out. I shot terrible. So the journey was, I just kind of made GM accidentally the first time, just by shooting super fast and trying to apply my knowledge that I learned from watching other people. So that was purely accident. And the problem was, I made GM, but I wasn't shooting GM. I was not shooting GM level. That didn't come until probably 6 months to a year later, when I was just kind of, okay, now I made it. How did I do that? what does it mean to be a GM? So then I actually learned to be consistent. And then I won the following Area 1 in Medford, Oregon in limited. And that's when I felt, hey, I'm shooting GM level, and I competed against the best, and I kept up with them shooting in the 90s, low 90s to mid 90s. We shot at Infinity Open in Vegas. And back then, Infinity Open was huge because top 5 gets SVI, in each division. It was pretty crazy. And, I was, I think, 4th overall, 5 points behind Robbie Latham at 96% in one of the matches in Vegas. And that was really weird, shooting against Robbie in the same squad. That was really, really interesting for me. It's like, wow, just a couple of years ago, I was watching these guys on ESPN. Here I am shooting against them. And what kind of turned the tide was I watched him shoot, and I go, well, I could do that. And I was shooting, matching the stages, like time and with score. I was doing it. And he just edged me out on that match. And I realized I'm there. It's just that I don't have the mental game. So then I started working on the mental aspect of it. And that was the toughest, right? The mental aspect of the game is the toughest. These guys that are at the top, they have really strong mental game. That's, I think, what separates those guys from the other GMs who haven't really mastered that part of it.
What I want to do is go back to your transition from C class to GM. What was your training like back then, and how did it change to make you a GM?
It is somewhere between obsession and dedication and just madness. I was dry firing 2 hours a day, 6 days a week. I mean, you know how people do, all the challenges, reload challenges and all of these. Back then, I was doing 0.7 draws and 0.6 reloads, on a 5-yard target. And I kind of stepped away from that because I realized those are cool, but it's not going to win you major matches. It really isn't. I mean, it helps, of course, but that's not doing that over and over again. You need to learn how to do it. It's just that is not where the focus should be. But so dry fire every day, couple hours a day. Maybe I'd take a day off. And then I didn't have a full-time job, and I was really active in the police department that I worked in, many different hats. So, I practice once a week and structured practice. I would set up speed courses. I would set up mini field courses, speed and field courses, and I would run them over and over again, right to left, left to right, front to back, back to front, and something like that, and just try to improve the time. And I actually ponder a lot. That's what I do. I shoot it, and I have revelations. And then I go, well, how did I do that? And I try to analyze how I did it, and then understand how I did it, and I replicate it. If I can replicate it like 5 times, I know I have it in my brain. It's kinesthetically in me. Now I can do that task, that skill set. So a lot of experimentation, but biggest thing is I was pushing hard. Try to do faster, more accurate, faster, more accurate, back and forth like that. And then I made sure to shoot every weekend to shoot a match. So dry fire every day, at least one practice session, but I would only shoot maybe 250 rounds there, and then shoot a local match. And of course, try to shoot as many sectionals and area match types as possible. Though it was kind of expensive, so I never got to shoot, every match that I wanted to shoot. But that was my routine. Just keep pushing harder than the last time.
What would you be doing for 2 hours of dry fire every day?
Obsession, reloading, straight, 30 minutes, drawing, 30 minutes, reloading and moving, on the move, reloading, getting into positions, kneeling, squatting, prone, just over and over again. But main thing I learned throughout that process is that after a while, I started cutting down on number of dry fire hours because I couldn't possibly keep that up forever. So what I started doing, because I had other things I had to do in my life. So what I started doing is being a little stingy, if you will, and be more economical with my dry fire time. I would really focus on mounting the gun and making it appear where I look. So that was my thing. I would look at the target, try to use my body to get the gun there, back and forth in various different distances, small size targets, large targets, back and forth, distance change up with my eyes, with my body, and see if I can see enough to sight. And if I broke the shot, then I'm going to be able to hit. And I think also what I learned during that process is if you watch a lot of people, they will dry fire really fast. But then when they go to live fire, they shoot really slow. And that's probably the most common thing I see. So what I try to do is I replicate how fast I shoot when I dry fire. So I know if I push the dry fire faster than I can shoot live fire, that's meaningless. It's kind of a waste of time. So I try to match what I do in live fire with dry fire. I try to match that up. So when I walk a stage at a match, I'm within a second of my prediction because I dry fire and walk the stage as if I'm shooting it. And you see people like sprinting around, like as if they're shooting, super GM speed. And then they shoot the field course. When it comes to live fire, they shoot it really methodical. That never makes sense to me. And I think it's detrimental for people who do that.
What if the person doesn't have the ability to get to the range to shoot? And a lot of guys say that you can build up your skills in dry fire. Do you think it's detrimental though, again, that you're not getting the response from the gun? It's going to be very foreign to you when you're actually shooting. Because I could see people dry firing and then they start pushing those power times up. They keep pushing and keep pushing and pushing to when they're doing a 4-second El Pres or something like that.
I think it's better than nothing, but it's pretty meaningless. After you dry fire that speed, you can't go repeat it in live fire. So if you're doing a 4-second El Pres, and what you think is all alpha, and then you go out there do a 4-second El Pres and you're shooting Charlie Delta, it's meaningless. So that means that your quality of your dry fire was terrible, number one. Number two, it also shows you that you have to confirm your dry fire with live fire. There's a saying, I don't know who coined it, live fire is just a confirmation that you did the dry fire correctly. And I do believe that. So you have to go over there and see if you can do what you did in dry fire, when you shoot live. Because did you practice correctly? What I can tell you is that when I practice at home with dry fire, I can do the same thing I'm practicing in live fire. Because I know I've been there, so it's easier for me because I made it to the GM level 4 times. So I know when I'm dry firing that I can do that. What's interesting is sometimes if my brain is conditioned correctly, I dry fire something and I go to a live fire and I have no expectation and I just want to see what I do. And often it's faster than what I dry fired because in the live fire, I'm more in the moment. I'm more in the subconscious brain than the dry fire. Dry fire tends to be more conscious effort. So you have to prove it and you have to experience it at a subconscious level in live fire. And that takes some effort too. I call it letting go. See what happens. Experience your shooting. Being a spectator, like we talked about before. be a spectator to you shooting.
When you made the first GM, is it just easier now to make GM in all the other divisions?
I think so. For instance, limited 10, I made that in 3 months, because basically same gun. It just only have 10 rounds. I really don't see a difference between limited and limited 10, except for the round count. Capacity. But even then, you have magwell. You can reload so much faster. It doesn't really hamper you that much because most of the field courses at least have distance between target arrays. So if you have a magwell, you can reload so fast that it really doesn't change things much. Where production carry optics, it does change things because if you miss your reload, you're overshooting the targets. Now it's costing you time. With the limited open, you're literally throwing the magazine in there. It's interesting. So it only took me 3 months. Now, when I tackled open, that was a different story because I've never shot
the dot.
Yeah, I never shot a dot before, so that was different. That took me a while. Because, like I've talked to you about this. If you stare at that dot, it'll drive you crazy because it bounces around all over the place. You feel like you don't have control of the gun. You feel like you can't get the gun or the dot to go to the target. You start doubting yourself, trying to make the shake go away, all of these things. So it took me a while, but then I figured it out. I found it more difficult to make GM in open than limited in some sense because there's such high-speed shooters in open. Especially now, but even back then, you already had Max Michel, JJ Rakaza. Even Terran used to shoot open for a while. These guys shoot the gun so fast. Transitions and splits were so fast. I had to bring up another level to make GM in open. So that took me like a year instead of like 3 months in limited 10. It took me a year to make GM in open. That was rough, actually. It was rougher than I thought it was going to be. The big advantage of the open, besides the compensator and magwell, is that the dot will tell you when you mess up. Dot will tell you all of your deficiencies. So when I went back to iron sights, I became a better shooter. Call my shots better. The gun lines up against the target better. I'm getting more A's. My eyes are developed more, so I can see faster. If I had to do it all over again, I talked to you about this before, I would always shoot an open division first and then go backwards. But most people do it the other way, right? They go, well, you got to start with the production, shoot 10-round magazines with iron sights and stock trigger. And then you people show up and like in our area, as you noted, we have Texas Stars and partial targets and, swinging platforms you got to be on, wobble bridges, ridiculous stuff. And you see new people showing up for production and they run out of magazines at a stage. They bring 6 and they don't have any more and they can't finish, and so I feel bad for them. I'm like, yeah, I always recommend new people, if they can afford it, shoot open. And they say, well, it's too expensive. You got to spend like $7,000. Well, not necessarily. You can make a cheaper open gun. An example would be, like a Glock 19C, the compensated, or with the comps on it, with the ports on it, right? You can shoot gun like that with a high cap magazine, and you have a heck of a better time understanding how to, or put a inexpensive optic in the dovetail of your Glock and just shoot it like that. Learn how to manage the gun first and then work it backwards. But people never want to do that. They want to kind of earn it the hard way, but it's sort of a waste of time and waste of ammo. It's much easier to go from open back down to production, in my opinion, having done it all. So open was challenging just because the level of the speed that people were shooting those guns was step above limited. Also, the difference in the open is not all open guns are equal. If you have good understanding of the load, the spring, the comp, the ports, the weight distribution, now you got thumb drive, all of the magwell, just the right kind. It really matters. So open gun really is a race gun division in that you could be the best in the world. If you have a junk open gun, you're not going to win. There's just no way. You can clearly see that when you put a beautiful open gun, beautiful meaning outstanding performance open gun, you can see the person leveling up right before your eyes. I mean, they're shooting like A level, and all of a sudden they look like a Grandmaster. And you see one of those guys, 18-year-old Christian sailor that shoots with us, and he just started shooting open about a year ago. I told him, hey, stop messing around with the iron sights, go to open. And he won 2 area matches this year, and in open, 18-year-old, and he's not. He does all the other sports too. He's a valedictorian of his school. He just graduated, and plays football, baseball. He's a little guy too. He's only about 5'8", 5'9", about 155 maybe. Amazing kid. Look out for him. Christian sailor. I'm sure he'll do great at the nationals. But for him, he just recently got a brand new open gun, and it's night and day. He went from like a master. He made GM. It's just in a few months from master to GM. So open really matters that you have a gun that's really tuned right for you. More so than limited, though there's a lot of tuning involved in those. And particularly a lot more so than production. And then that's what I tackled next. And I tackled production because I wanted to kind of go back to shooting guns that we shoot in law enforcement. So I shot production with many guns, Glock 34s, or 4, MMP Pro, CZ SP01, 10 Folio Stock 2, SIG P320. I shot all of them in production. And I like them all. Different guns have different advantages. And I won 2 different area matches in production. One with CZSP01. One, I hated doing it because although I can shoot a Glock, I don't like it. I just do not like a Glock because the grip angle just doesn't work for me. However, it's like something that I wanted to prove to myself I can do with gun that everybody shoots in law enforcement. So I took a Glock 34. Made my own sights and did my own trigger job, and I won Area 1 with it. And I think that was the most fulfillment I had in production is when I did that, when I took a gun that I don't really like and I performed well with it. And production now, it took me about a year and a half to make GM with that. That was pretty tough too, just because you have no magwell. It's not like a limited gun. The trigger, even if you're shooting TAM4 or CZ, you still got to deal with the longer trigger pull. You got to deal with no magwell, that kind of stuff. And you can't play with the load and spring and everything as well as like a limited gun. Actually, some of the limited guns now is pretty ridiculous what you can do with it. I mean, it's virtually like an open gun with iron sights, But I think I appreciated production the most. So, and after that, now I am just kind of having great time with carry optics, and I don't know, I got up to like 93 or something in carry optics, but I'm not really focusing on that. I'm just shooting and seeing what happens. And at some time I'll really focus on that here, maybe next year, because I'll be retired by January 1st. So I'll focus more on the shooting when that happens. Hopefully I can advance in carry optics.
Well, you certainly do things different than most people, starting with or suggesting to start with open as your first gun and going that route for GM. And then you also started with trigger speed as opposed to accuracy, where most people start with the accuracy and then it seems like they almost have a hard time building up that trigger speed. So what were you doing to get that faster trigger speed?
Yeah, this is something that I haven't heard anybody teaching this. And the reality is you're not able to pull the trigger 10 times a second. You just can't. What it is, the fast doubles and triples and even sometimes 6 rounds. And you see most of the time people will do 2s and 3 rounds much faster than 6 rounds or more. And the reason is it's really easy it's like a control bump. So after you break the shot, your trigger finger is relaxed and you release enough where the recoiling of the gun, the slide, recoiling back, traps the trigger against your finger. And you time it. So it's like a bump fire, bop, like this. And most people are not aware they're doing it. There's people with extreme trigger speed. When you ask them, they go, I don't know, just pull the trigger fast. And watch them dry firing their gun. They don't do 10, 11 splits. They don't. They do about 15, 18, maybe 20 splits. But when they live fire, they do 11, 12 splits. And it's because the live gun is different than dry firing trigger. Even with the clicker that we used to have with the SIG P320, I still have those FCUs with the clickers. I like those. And you see it on the video, I still have those. I like that one so that I can really get on it. And I tried it. Yeah, I could probably do 2-0 splits. I cannot do 15, 14. But you see, when I fire live fire, I regularly do a 14. 14, 15, regularly do it because it's a controlled bump fire. And only way to really do it is power grip and lock the wrist. Power grip with your support hand, lock the wrist so that you can relax this hand and just bump it. Bump up like this, just tapping it twice like that. And of course, it takes practice, but you physically cannot consciously go like this and do those wicked splits. So there are like little tricks that people do that most people don't think about. So trigger speed is huge, but transition is probably more important because you can make up for the trigger speed deficiency with fast transitions. And I see a lot of people that way, and I learn from them how to transition fast. So sometimes I can transition faster than I can trigger. It's pretty amazing. I mean, the targets are close enough, right? So, and sometimes it surprises me how fast I can transition. And it's because of the homework I've done, going from point A to point B and just looking and allowing the gun to follow and timing the trigger. So also, most people move the gun, stop the gun, and then pull the trigger. You should get to the point where you're actually getting the trigger trapped as the gun comes to a rest. And just as the gun's coming to rest, you're pulling the trigger already. So a lot of it is timing. So, and these are things that people don't do that hampers them. And you can tell right away they're not doing it because they look mechanical. They look, labored. And you can clearly see when somebody gets it. And the moment that it happens, you go, yes. Travis Tomasi, 1 year I was shooting against him in January. I was just happy to be shooting against him in Puyallup, Washington. And I shot a stage and he goes, GM, like that. That's all he says. He doesn't say a lot, right? GM. I was like, what does that mean? He goes, you're GM, like that, And it's something about when people can transition fast, pull the trigger fast, time it correctly, you just kind of have that look. And I learned because I helped a bunch of people become GMs over the last 18 years or whatever. And some of them I actually trained to become GMs. That was interesting. 3 people I literally trained from C class all the way to GM. And everything that I did, I helped them do it. And they became GM. One of them was Bobby McGee. He'll tell you that. And Bobby McGee from Safireland used to practice with me in my range. He would drive 50 miles in traffic for 2 hours just to come practice with me. And then he became a GM, So A lot of effort, though. I think most people would be really surprised how much work it takes to become a GM. It really does. I mean, some people can just do it because they're have the drive. Some people drive, frankly, puzzles me. Where do they get that drive? Dry firing until their hands bleed. Hwanse Kim, right? He dry fires until he literally takes his support hand and rips his strong hand, makes it bleed because he's dry firing so often, so many hours. That kind of drive, I think it takes certain people. Not everybody's willing to do it. But surely, if you're willing to put the work in, almost everybody can become a GM, I think, in my opinion, with if you follow directions, if you work hard at it, and you have an open mind, I think they can make GM. But again, are you willing to do the work would be my question.
Well, you were talking about the transitions, and I know you submitted your drill. It is basically the transitions. So let's get into your drill.
Sure.
So I'm going to pop up your drill here, and you can talk us through it.
Sure.
Okay. Can you see it?
I see it.
Okay. So I'm going to hit play, and you can talk us through it.
So what I'm doing here, I have targets set up 6 yards away, about 5 feet apart, 3 of them. And you can see that what I'm trying to do there is allow the gun to follow my eyes. So meaning I mount the gun and I move the lower extremities, knees, ankles, hips, try to move the upper body as little as possible. I mean, you have to move at the waist somewhat, but there's no bone structure at your waist. So you want to try to tighten the core and try not to move here. So you can see the frontal view here. So as soon as I whip my head and eyes to the next target, I'm allowing the gun, the upper body, to just follow by using my structure in the lower extremity. So you can see, you should be able to see my knees flex and my ankles flex. Sometimes even my feet, I can feel it in my feet. So I'm doing this drill left to right to left, from center to left, right, and right, left, center. And here's a live fire. So that was a left to right live fire. You see that I'm mimicking exactly what I did in dry fire. And then here's right to left. And then I think you see center, left, and right. Just various drills you can do to allow your gun to follow your eyes. So you basically, every time you shoot, it's effortless in some sense, because you're not having to think after you get this down. Center, left, right. I'm breaking the shot as soon as I look at the target. And here I'm shooting carry optics, so the dot is finding its way. And I'm breaking the shot before I see the dot, actually. So the dot is there as I break the shot. So I think here I do right, left, in the middle, center, right, left, middle, like that. Again, it's about 6 yards, targets are wide, and here is a side view of it, so you can see my body posture a little bit. You can see that I'm trying to move as much as I can with lower extremities and leaving the upper body platform exactly the same. Really important that you let the gun follow your eyes. That was left to right. And you see that I'm holding. The reason I'm holding is verification that dot definitely was there when I fired it. Because you won't always see the dot perfectly. And if you're seeing the dot perfectly when you're shooting at these targets up close like this, you're way too slow. So here's middle, left, right. And now I think the last one is center, right, left, middle. I'm just visualizing what it should look like when I'm live firing here. And I'm going to verify it with live fire to see if my dry fire was accurate. So here it is. It should look about the same. And so if you play this video back, I think you see that the time is going to be very similar between dry fire and live fire. And here I'm just kind of showing, I think I'm going to grab the camera here just to show you about what it looked like.
I did this cold turkey run
class all day.
Looks like,
and I didn't have time to do like practice or
1,
anything.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6 alpha, 2
and,
Charlie.
Yeah, not exactly perfect.
6 alpha, 2 Charlie, 7 alpha, 1 Charlie. Not bad for cold turkey.
And I was doing
you want to tighten that up.
There.
So you end up
Wicked
with
splits,
alphas,
you know.
of course. Transition drill using your body index.
Here at these kind of distances, 6 yards, 5 feet apart.
Just repeat what you said that last one because you were kind of talking over your video.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'm just getting acceptable heads down the center and practicing that way. And my concern here mainly is transitioning fast and allowing the gun to land where I look, and I'm breaking the shot just as it's doing that. I'm not waiting until the dot lands at the center of the target to break the shot. I'm breaking the shot as the dot lands, and I'm already moving to the next one. So you see like flash of the dot. You see the dragging of the dot, flash of the dot. But at the end, you see that I actually pause and follow through. And the reason I do that is so that when I finish, the dot become clear and it's on the center, I know my mount was good. And so that are kinesthetically embed into my brain, and I repeat that. And that means it's a successful training. Like I said, if you dry fire all day but not verify with live fire, you can get a false sense of security, a false sense of confidence that you can do that in real life. Chances are not. So if you do these drills right after you dry fire and know what your capability is, next time you dry fire, you do it more realistically.
You mentioned that you've coached a bunch of people to GM, and you are obviously an instructor, and we'll get to that. But I'm curious, what are some of the things that you're coaching these people to do to get that path to GM?
Basically, this is figuratively speaking, but I'll take a broomstick and poke him on the ass and make him go faster. I have them cut the dwell time, every aspect of their life. Whatever they're doing, don't dwell. And I think human beings have a natural tendency to dwell, meaning pause before they take action. And in shooting, it is somewhat built into law enforcement because we have to assess before we take action. So I think most of the people that I taught are cops, and some are not, but cops tend to kind of pause a little more because they're assessing, taking that extra time because that's the nature of our job, right? You got to assess what you have. So in shooting, you have to push them past that. So you got to cut the dwell time, cut the transition time, trigger speed, distance change up, moving efficiently from point A to point B, breaking the shot as you land the plane. You don't waste any time. As soon as you break the last shot, you're already stepping off and moving to the next position. So we do a lot of foot drills, transition drills, distance change up, draws, reloads, and reloading and getting back on target and firing accurately. Like when you dry fire, people will shoot, reload, shoot, but are they really hitting center? That kind of stuff. So you have to repeat that or verify that in live fire. So these are various drills, but mostly what helped the most is setting up micro stages, mini stages, and make sure there's something at stake. Loser of this stage is going to buy coffee. Right? Something at stake, and you run it like real time with a timer, and then you try to beat your instructor. It got to the point where it's really ugly. One of my students who started off when I was GM, he was unclassified. In 2.5 years, he became a GM, and I had a hard time beating him. And I was at the top of my game at the time too. So unfortunately, he moved to California, and he's more interested in cycling and physical fitness than shooting. He still shoots. He's a range master in his police department in Chula Vista. Very good shooter, but he just kind of stepped away from competition. But he's actually helped his department convert to P320, and you know where that comes from because he's my former student. But others in other parts of the country, they're still shooting, and it was interesting education for me, getting somebody to understand what I'm talking about, getting them to see what I see. And there was a lot of resistance. They said, well, I want to wait until I see more sight. No, break the shot. That kind of stuff. I mean, why do you need it? Can you get the hit? Yes. Then what do you need to see more sights for? Just don't waste time. Break the shot. Go with it. Learn what it takes, little it takes to make the shot, or how much sight you have to make the shot. So constant pushing, taking them out of the comfort zone. And every time it's the stepping process, right? Shoot faster. Know where your limit is. Drop down a little bit. Be accurate. So be accurate and fast. Then next time, shoot faster. Drop down a little bit, be more accurate. So it's like step back, up and down, right? Speed, accuracy. Speed, accuracy. And then you tell people, well, today, I tell my students, today, I don't care what you do. You're going to shoot all alphas on every target. And they hate it. And the next time I say, I don't care if you got alphas. As long as you have Alpha Charlie or 2 Charlies, you're going to do that today. You're going to shoot as fast as you can outside of your comfort zone. And the reason I do that is so that you learn how to see fast. You learn how to process information fast. And it's especially revealing when you're shooting open. You see when you push people in open or optics, they can do much more in that with the dot rather than the iron sight. There's a limiting factor in iron sights in that it's psychological. Human beings, especially the ones that learn how to front sight focus from the very beginning, do not want to let that side picture go. They want to keep that picture, and it's extremely slow, extremely slow. So it's a constant pushing, taking them out of the comfort zone, making them do all those things fast, and not accepting, well, they can't do it. They can't do it. And then probably the toughest part is mental game. Getting them to understand the mental aspect of competing. That's, sometimes you can't help them. I have a couple of students that I couldn't help them. They're practice champions, practice grandmasters. They go to a match and they fold. They can never take control of their emotions. They can never free their minds.
Now that you're retiring, you're going to get into teaching full time. Are you going to go to places I know you're coming down here for a class, but is that something that you're going to be doing? You're going to be traveling the country teaching classes, or do people need to come to Washington to train with you?
No, I'm willing to travel to wherever, as long as there's interest. I'll go to those locations, of course, in Washington as well. But frankly, in Washington, it really is only fun to shoot between May and September. The rest of the time, you're shooting in the rain. So after I retire, it'd be nice to actually go teach in a little warmer weathers where it's not raining. I don't mind the cold, actually, as long as there's no rain involved in it. So it's rough around here to teach when it's raining. So that combined with, I use teaching and traveling and experiencing other places all together when I'm retired. Make a little money, and just enjoy myself, enjoy my retirement. And, 2 things I love to do. I love to shoot competition and teach. My big thing is learning from students how they learn. I try to get into the brain and get them to understand what I'm talking about, try to get them to see what I'm doing.
So what would be the best way to reach out to you?
I'm in the process of building my website. My company is called Master Reflex Shooting Institute. Reflex meaning in the manner of reflex shooting, like target focus. Those are my specialty. How to shoot fast, reference in the sight, iron sight, and reflex meaning red dots. So those are two things I like to really focus on because that's what I love to do, and that's what I really understand, and I can get that information out to other people and help them. And right now, I will have a website, but currently my email is just like my name, initial YLEEGM @gmail.com. So just get a hold of me there. There's interest, or get a class together and travel. But soon there'll be a website, and I can put that information out on social media.